Good to see everybody. Oh my gosh, so many great faces from different parts of Fordham. Hey, Natalie. All right, thanks, Ava, for letting everybody in. Hi, Brendan. Hi, Bob.
Hello.
Hello, good to see you guys. Hi, Eileen. Okay, well, I think um, I'll just give it another minute as people are coming into our room. It's so good to see you. Hi, Sage. Okay. All right. Well, I think we have got a lot of people here, and so we'll get started. So good evening, everybody. Welcome to our discussion, Where Can the Liberal Arts Take Me? It's so awesome to see faces from so many different parts of Fordham. We've got some honor students. I see some theology majors, a lot of students from my Religion in the Modern World class, a couple Manresa students, and then also we have faculty members from the theology department I see, and our awesome, generous guest speakers, who I will introduce in just a moment. But before I do my introductions, I just want to say a few words of welcome of how this came about. So a few of you have heard this story, but when everything kind of stopped and unraveled in March, it was maybe around like April and May, I started to hear from a lot of students, some of my advisees, some former advisees, even some alum who had really taken the time of kind of pause and stop to really almost feel like they were off the rush of the treadmill of go, go, go. And they were really taking the time to think, all right, what am I even doing in college? Am I on the path I want to be on? Where am I headed? But, am I headed in the right direction? But it was this context, that we're still in this context of the pandemic, of serious anxieties about new economic constraints, concerns about the present and the future, that sort of my typical like liberal arts little nuggets of wisdom didn't quite feel like they matched kind of the gravity of the moment. My kind of, oh wait, you'll figure it out later, or the liberal arts offers critical thinking. That's so practical. I mean, I do still believe all of those things are true, but I felt like this time of real like serious anxiety and uncertainty, I needed more concrete things to say to students. As they were thinking about their futures. And so I put a post on Facebook to my family and friends asking them, like, hey, do you have a career that you feel like is a career you would want young people, you would recommend to young people to enter into? And especially thinking of all my students in the liberal arts majors who feel tempted, I feel like at Fordham, to transfer into the Gabelli School of Business. Like business schools feel fancier and fancier all the time. So thinking particularly about my liberal arts students, that do they have a career they feel like would be something they would recommend to young people, and what practical things, like what would be a good grad program, internships, those practical stuff about, taking you from your liberal arts degree to what's next after college, because I don't know all of that stuff. And almost 80 people responded, everything from like my random stepdad's brother in Arizona to the awesome women on this panel tonight responded with so many really practical but super hopeful things about their meaningful careers and just practical things. And so I thought I really appreciated hearing from them, and I invited a few of them to come and share a little bit more with our students. And the 5 women tonight agreed to join us, which I'm so thrilled about. And I asked these 5 in particular because A, they're just super smart, awesome women. And they also have careers that aren't so obvious. Like they aren't so obvious in the sense of, you major in accounting, you're an accountant. Like they're careers that I really hadn't heard of. Like Emily, my cousin, is a UX writer. I really had never heard of that. And a bunch of people replied about data analytics. And so we have that, things I really didn't really even know about, or even like Amy, who does law but works at the Met. I didn't know museums had lawyers. And so things that are not like on the obvious radar, I think. So, and I was thrilled that they they're willing to take some time out of their evening and share with you all. And I think that, hearing from them about their journeys from the liberal arts to what they're doing now in their careers, along with like practical tips, I think the most important thing it does, it helps us in this context of the pandemic reclaim the joys of planning for the future and anticipating. Like that is really fun. I love trip planning for the future, but it's really hard in the pandemic to plan. I know a bunch of juniors are on here whose plans like completely unraveled in terms of study abroad, and so many plans have been shot, but like it's fun to plan. And they, I think, are going to help us just by talking about their past. They might help you imagine, possibilities for your future and what steps you might need to do to plan that. And that, I think, can be like a really source of meaning and joy. So I'm excited to do that tonight. And what we're going to do is there's five speakers, and they are each going to talk for between 5 and 7 minutes. So that will take us like to a half hour, 45 minutes. And then we'll open the chat up for Q&A. And if I could I'll do just a quick introduction now. So maybe if all of our speakers can unmute, and then when you say hi, people can see who you are. But we have my cousin, Emily Brule, who is zooming in from Michigan. She recently relocated back to our hometown. We grew up together. She's like a sister. She relocated back to Michigan from Austin, Texas, where she was working at Google as a writer. But she, in the pandemic, wanted to be closer to family, so she's back to where we grew up. And then we have Jennifer Gurley, who's here with us from Vermont. She's a colleague from Religious Studies. We spent a 3-week conference together in North Carolina, and she has since switched careers and now has started her own coffee roasting business. She's the founder and owner of Rockingham Roasters Coffee in Vermont. And then we have also with us her daughter, Alexandra Gurley, who's zooming in from Colorado. This is my first time meeting Alexandra, but Jennifer in response said, your students need to know about data analytics, and other people responded, and I've heard of it, but I really didn't know what that is. And so Alexandra is so generous, not even feeling obligated to me. She's not my cousin or friend, but she still is joining us, and she's more, I think, closer to your guys' age. She's a more recent grad. And then we have my neighbor and friend, Amy Liberti, who is a Fordham Law School grad, and she's on the board of Fordham's alumni. And she is a total Fordham fan, and she is a lawyer for the Met, the Metropolitan Museum of Art. She's their Associate General Counsel. And then finally, we have Ellen Wynn up here. And Ellen is a very close friend of one of my best friends in grad school. She's zooming in from Brooklyn, and she has worked in education public policy for many years in New York City for different NGOs in the field of public policy, and now she's a consultant in that field. So welcome everybody. Thank you so much for being here. It's great to see so many of you, and we will begin with Emily, my cousin. So thanks so much.
Well, thanks, Brenna. I'll just share, I have a little slideshow to share, so I'll see if I can get that going here. All right. Can you guys see this?
Yep.
Give me a thumbs up. All right. Hey, everyone. Thank you for that introduction, Brenna. And yes, Brenna is my cousin and one of my best friends. We are about 5 months apart. So if she asks me to do anything, I'm happy to do it. And I just pulled together some slides because it'll keep me on the rails, hopefully, and within time. So kind of the topic of our conversation tonight, of course, is, how did liberal arts take you to where you are today? And I started by studying the very practical discipline of art history. So I have a undergrad and master's degree in art history, and specifically was studying things like feminist art history and performance art. And that was really my passion. And that's, what I started in, and I did get a job in the arts and worked in the museum world in the first part of my career. But then I've kind of transitioned that into being a UX writer, content strategist, which I'll talk to you about more. But so since I graduated, I've worn many different hats. So I was a curator. I was also a caterer, trying to make ends meet because art museums don't pay very much when you're first starting out, or ever really. I've been a researcher, an experience designer, a content strategist, copywriter, UX writer. Pretty much I've given myself different titles and changed with, um, flexing to what different opportunities were available, and what I could kind of weasel my way into new places, and get new jobs with new titles. But I think that openness to taking on different um, careers and titles, and not being married to one thing, is something that's important, and that I've learned throughout the years. So what is a UX writer? Because you might not all know that term. Um, so UX stands for user experience. And so you have user experience designers who design all of the apps and websites and different platforms or digital experiences that you see. And then a UX writer is the person who's writing all of the copy that goes into those experiences. So somebody's got to write all that copy, and hopefully it's good copy. So when you think about writing, you often think about people who write more long form copy, things like articles, or more like men's style, like writing in an ad that goes in a magazine. But more and more, there's so much copy and things like, like I was saying, websites, apps, and even though it's like very often very small, or looks very like non-important copy, you can see there's things like, especially today, about like communicating ideas around coronavirus, or why certain ads are being shown to you, and really how you communicate those ideas is super important. So these are the kind of things that UX writers work on. And so practically what this work looks like is everything from sketching ideas, or helping teams brainstorm what could this app or experience be like in the future. My work is sometimes creating like very simple what we call wireframes or sketches, like this black and white image you see in the middle, or kind of creating what we call mocks to show what copy should go where on a page, and what ideas should be communicated where. And then as you get closer to kind of writing copy that goes in final websites or apps, you're writing, unfortunately, sometimes in very complicated spreadsheets, or writing directly, working with designers in their designs, because obviously, space is limited, and you have to like look at things in context and see how they work. So it's just giving you a little bit of flavor of kind of the work we do, and how we do it on a day-to-day basis. So, when I look back at like my art career and how it has helped me, or my art history background and how it's helped me get here, I think there's so many connections between liberal arts and what I do today, and like finding the big ideas. So talking about contemporary art is often like very complex topics, and you need to simplify those down so that everyone can understand them and appreciate them. Working in museums was often kind of orchestrating complex projects, working with lots of different types of people. But I think that underlying skills that I learned in art history, which is kind of critical thinking as well as strong writing background, are things that make me, have helped me in my career today. So lastly, I just want to share a few practical tips, hopefully for you as you move forward in whatever you're doing. For me, in the first part of my career, internships did work, especially in art history and getting jobs in museums. Hopefully you don't have to take unpaid internships, but I know places like Google as well have internships for UX writers, and maybe if places didn't, you could pitch that idea. In terms of my career specifically, having a portfolio that is like very visual, as well as just a resume. So meaning, take snapshot or, take screenshots of things you create, and share those, because if you're going to work with designers or in a kind of a technology or a startup kind of company, they often want to see kind of examples of your work, not just like reading about it. Learn how to position yourself. So what I'm thinking here is kind of going back to how I've had lots of different titles. Don't be afraid to, when you see a job, don't just fire off like the same old resume and cover letter for each job. Like really tailor your background and your experience to that job so that, you can really highlight how your skills match what they're looking for. Living in Austin before here, I asked a lot of people for coffee dates. I think you can ask people for virtual coffee dates and have like, kind of informational interviews with people who do things that you're interested in as well. And then my last couple tips here, if you're interested in something like UX design or UX writing, there's tons of stuff about design thinking, which is, kind of a method or a way of approaching problems. There's tons of stuff out there that you can learn for free, as well as maybe learn some basic design programs like Figma or Sketch, which are the design tools that designers use. And that way you can collaborate with designers. Anyways, I kind of just went super, super fast, but wanted to give you a little bit of highlights about my work and how I got here. So I'm happy to answer any questions at the end.
Thank you. Oh my gosh. So I'm like so close with Emily and I didn't know nothing about her professional life. So that was really interesting. Thank you so much for sharing. That was really interesting. So, yeah, I'm sure we all have a lot of questions. So what we'll do is save your questions and we'll open up the chat at the end. So we'll just keep going. But Emmy, that was really awesome. Thank you. Super interesting. So we will go now to Jennifer Gurley, zooming in from Vermont. She's the one who has the founder and owner of Rockingham Roasters Coffee. Okay, take it away, Jennifer. Thanks again, Emily.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, yay, I did that part right. Okay. So hello, I just want to say hi to all the students listening and to sympathize or try to sympathize with this world you're in now. Good God. So I actually feel hopeful about it from this position, but let me just tell you a little bit why. So I was a tenured professor of English, tenured, went all the way, PhD, and I left my career, met Brenna when we were in a religious studies seminar, left my career to start a coffee business 3 years ago. And I just want to say right now, I think it's a fantastic time to become an entrepreneur. I'll talk to you a little bit about that. So I'm talking about me as a coffee owner, but entrepreneurship is big. Read Andrew Yang's book. Let me just say a couple of things about that. So first, sort of a few things I just want to say. These are some generalizations, but some cliches, some beliefs, but just 4 things really quickly, especially as a liberal arts major. Go after what you want. Nobody's going to come after you. You have to go after what you want, all right? And you especially have to go after what you want when you don't know what that is, all right? You have to work even harder. I had no idea what I was doing when I got out of college. Then you have to work hard, and I mean really hard, 80 to 90 hours a week. You got to be willing. And I'll talk about what that meant for me practically. You need to be humble, all right? Be willing to learn. Don't think any job is beneath you. And be willing to fail. I have failed repeatedly, and I'll tell you about some of those failures, okay? And then finally, be adaptable. The world changes, and you need to be able to change along with it. I've met a lot of people along the way who are kind of, set in their ways, and it doesn't serve you for very long, especially if you have to pay your own bills, right? Let me just tell you what I make right now. I began as a professor at a $38,000 salary. I had 10 years of school and a PhD program, master's degree, undergraduate, student loans. I was a Pell kid. A lot of you know what that is. So I paid my own way through college. $38,000 was the starting salary for my job. So I was happy. I loved what I did. And I worked my way up. When I left that job, I worked up to a $70,000 salary, and it took 16 years to get there. So you're not going to strike it big. However, I had tenure at a guaranteed job for life, which almost nobody in the universe has. And I really did love my job. So I got burnt out, and for a number of reasons, and I started this business, but I didn't start it immediately. I'm not a romantic. Again, I always had to pay my own bills. So I started the company while I had my other job. And rather than working 80 hours a week at my professorial job, I started to work 40 hours. I started to work like a normal person at this job, and I put the other 30 to 40 hours a week into starting the business. I didn't actually leave my other job until I was sure that the business was going to work. Okay, so it took 2 years to figure that out. So let me just tell you a couple of things about this. I set my timer. So I was a Pell kid. I was a Japanese major in college with an emphasis in international relations philosophy. My PhD was in what's called rhetoric at Berkeley. It's kind of a fancy theory program. How I got in there, I don't know. That's another story. But I did this Japanese degree when everybody told me that I shouldn't do it, that it was too hard or something like this, right? So I did that. I also worked on average 40 hours a week the whole time I was in school. I did that while I also, so 40 hours, usually I had 10 hours of an unpaid internship. So I had about 30 hours of work that paid my bills. I also had student loans. So when I got done with college, when people were starting to look for jobs, I was happy just to have a waitressing job for a while. I was exhausted. And people would say, now you're going to really have to start to work. And it used to piss me off so much. All right. So this is not to say that this is just my story. But I took a break and I just waited tables. I worked in an Asian bookstore a little bit. I continued some unpaid internships, and I took a break and I saved up a little bit of money, went to Mexico for 2 months and came back. And then I jumped into lots of different jobs, just part-time here and there, because I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was offered a very high-paying job from a Japanese business when I graduated, but I didn't want to do it. I loved my major. I loved being in Japan, but I realized it wasn't what I wanted to do. Much to my father's chagrin. He was like, my God, you're set, right? He was very proud and very supportive, but that's just not what I wanted to do. So I tried a number of things. I failed a number of things. I tried part-time work here and there, and I figured out that I really did want to go to graduate school. It wasn't a backup for me. It wasn't because I didn't know what I wanted to do. I had these burning questions and I needed to go, and I couldn't imagine doing anything else. So I got it paid for. I got it paid for. I was very lucky. I got a tenure track job after, I never planned to get a tenure track job. Nobody gets one. I just didn't know what I was going to do after this. I thought that I would go do something else, again, because I was willing to take a job anywhere just to start doing something. So I got this job, and many years later, loved it, and started watching actually a lot of students in college having a lot of trouble now. Tuition's crazy, as you know. Things have gotten out of control. A lot has changed in higher education. And I found myself talking to students more about how they were going to get out and pay the bills. And I really had a lot to say about that. So I started this coffee business I bought a really nice high-end coffee roaster, and I started teaching myself. I had been interested in it forever. I know a lot about coffee. I've traveled a lot. But I just started teaching myself while I had my other full-time job. And thousands of hours later, with experimenting with the coffee, and literally thousands of hours, my husband can attest to this, I got the business off the ground. I made nothing the first year, in fact, had a loss because I had invested some of my money saved. The equivalent for you would be to find an investor. You have something you believe in, you find an investor. Entrepreneurs do this all the time. And I don't mean Shark Tank level investor. I mean someone who believes in your idea, because those people, that's insanity. I mean, that happens, right? But those people have come in there onto that show after they've already invested a little bit of their own money and have got something really good, right? So you can find an investor, you can find someone to get you started. My sister did this very successfully with a restaurant in Burlington, Vermont. I started building. Second year, I still didn't make any money, but I had my other salary. I didn't expect to make any money though. All the money that I had sales, but all the money I was making was going back into building the business. And this year I'll probably clock about a $75,000 salary. So I've only gone 1 year. I haven't gone without a salary because I hung on to my other job. But the equivalent for you, you would be able to pay your bills if you had gone through some of the steps that I did. If you had been willing to, had a little bit of savings, had a little investor, you would have been able to pay the bills. Student loans are crazy, and I understand that. You can do forbearances, you can all do all sorts of creative things like I did. It's not fun, but you can do it. I don't mean to sound Pollyanna-ish about this because it's a lot of really, really, really hard work. But please, and you can't do everything in the world, and I failed a number of times along the way. So I'd be really happy to talk to anybody about particular questions you had about how to figure out the next steps, or what do you mean go find an investor? How do you do that? Or, so how did you figure out how to pay the bills, or how many jobs did you work at one time? But I do want to say that, I am hiring, so.
Wow, nice.
So keep that in mind. I will tell you one story. Oh, did I go over time? I think I'm over time. I'll tell you this very quickly. People I don't hire come in and say, I want to be a coffee roaster. Anyone who works for me, because this is, you start by scrubbing the toilets, and I'm exaggerating a little bit, but everybody does everything. I do everything, so everybody else is going to do everything too. And I have some fantastic employees now who they have no experience in coffee, but they want to dig in and learn everything, and no job is too good for them. And one of them, I think I'm going to promote to being a coffee roaster at some point. So anyway, I'm done. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. I really appreciate the talking about the nitty gritty and the finances, and I'm sure we have a lot of questions. We'll keep moving along, but that was super interesting. Thank you. And thank you also for introducing us to your lovely daughter who's with us, Alexandra. Thank you very much.
Hi.
For joining a group of total strangers except for your mom. But I'm so happy because I heard from many people on this post about data analytics as a good writing, thinking, researching kind of job, but I don't know anything about it. So thank you for joining us, Alexandra.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So if it looks like I'm looking over to the side at my notes, it's because I am. So bear with me. So I work in a very specific sector of data analytics, but I am specifically a senior consultant for Tech Systems, and we do healthcare IT for Epic. Epic is an EMR system. It stands for Electronic Medical Records System. And more specifically, I write reports using SQL Server Management, which is basically a database of patient information. So the way that I explain this in a little easier terms is think of a filing cabinet where every file corresponds to a patient and it contains a bunch of information about that patient. And what SQL does is it allows us to pull data and pull trends from all those files without having to do that manually. So if you have 100 files in the cabinet and each one of those is a person and 20 of them have heart disease, then I can really quickly write code that says, give me everyone with heart disease. And instead of having to open that filing cabinet and look at every single file and say, okay, this 20 has heart disease and the rest don't, we just really quickly, it takes 2 seconds, you write code and it pulls all the patients that correspond to your code. So that's what I do every day. This has been really, really prevalent, especially during COVID. So all of the numbers that you're seeing being reported, that's all done from reporting. So we look at all COVID positive tests, and then we are able to pull different patient demographics and just different information to try to figure out what all these patients have in common, if anything. So I will back up now. I went to Lemoyne College in Syracuse, New York, so not too far from you guys. And I started as an undeclared major. I really had no idea what I wanted to do. I was interested in international business, so I ended up taking French in addition to all of my standard courses. And after my first semester, I decided that I wanted to be pre-med. So I switched to bio, and I took calc so that I could take calc-based physics because it was the harder one. And once I found out there was a harder one, I had to do that one. And I ended up loving math and hating bio. So I switched to math, and I went as far as I could in math, which was Calc 4, intermediate algebra. I don't know, probably doesn't sound very fun to a lot of people, but I loved it. And I got to the point with a math major where I realized that there aren't a ton of careers that you can do with a straight math major. And I wanted to more apply my math rather than just do math all the time. So I ended up switching to business analytics, and that's what I graduated with. So the course that I took was kind of specific to my college, but it was mostly Excel-based analytics. And so we did a lot of forecasting data and kind of like what I'm doing now, just trending data, seeing where trends exist, stuff like that. So I learned how to use Excel, and I really, really liked it. Along the way, I ended up getting a minor in philosophy, math, and French. So I graduated math, philosophy, French, and then major in business analytics. So my senior year, the dean of business, who at the time he was brought on just to kind of give students advice about business, he joined just kind of floating around, literally just there to give us advice. And I was like, oh, well, yeah, I'm going to do that for sure. So I started meeting with him almost weekly to figure out what I wanted to do after college. And in addition to that, because I know that's not like very concrete advice, most people don't just have business people floating around. I went to every career service networking event that they offered. And what was interesting was that a lot of his contacts and a lot of the people that I would see at the events overlapped. So a combination of that overlap ended up having the local hospital create an internship for me in their purchasing department doing analytics. And it was unpaid. And I worked unpaid after graduation for 6 months. So one point that I want to make is I think it's important to at least consider working for free if it means that you're making really good connections, because 99% of the time those connections will get you somewhere. It got me somewhere. I got offered a full-time job at the hospital doing an Epic implementation. And my first job, I was making $37,000 a year. And so I worked as full-time for 5 years. Along the way, I found out that you can do consulting after you put in 5 years of being full-time. And so I knew that that's what I wanted to do once I heard about it. And so I ended up around $80,000 as full-time, and I was 25 at the time-ish. I switched to consulting. So benefits of consulting are, it's a lot more money. That is the benefit of consulting. It's also nice if you like to travel. You don't get to choose where you travel to, but a lot of clients will have you travel on site. So you can live wherever you want because you're either working from home or you're traveling to the office, and then the consulting company pays for it. Con is that it's contract-based, so you never have job security beyond your next contract, and especially in an economy like this, it can be a little bit scary. And then I think that's really honestly the only con about consulting. You do have to kind of fake it till you make it with consulting because you are expected to be an expert across the board. And so if you don't know how to do something, my advice there is you say that you've done it 100 times and you work as much as you need to figure out how to do it. So I've done that a lot, and it gets a little nerve-wracking because you're like literally lying to people's faces, but I always figure it out. So you just got to get comfortable with that feeling. Consulting also, so salary, you can make around $200,000 a year, just for a concrete number there. Epic Consulting specifically is higher than most IT consulting. So another piece of concrete advice to get into my field specifically, since I kind of created my own internship, which led to this, you can apply directly with Epic. So if you just go to Epic, if you just Google Epic, you'll find it. They have their career page, and they accept all majors, and they actually prefer to hire across the board. One of my good friends works there, and he was a philosophy major, and he worked there for 5 years. Starting salary at Epic is $65K, and you can make upwards of 300 if you work there for 5 years. So it can be fairly lucrative. You work a lot. I know everyone at Epic works at least 80 hours plus. With consulting, you only bill for what you work. So it's a little bit of a different model there. Other concrete advice is attend all your job fairs. It's a really good way to get face-to-face with people. It's kind of generic advice, but it's really good. Also, in interviews, be really honest about what you know and what you don't know. And whenever I don't know something, I say that, but I also let them know that I'm a quick learner, and I give an example of when I didn't know something and I was still able to figure it out. And I think that honesty and transparency goes a long way. So that's all I've got for now. And yeah, happy to answer any specific questions that you guys have.
Okay, thank you so much, Alexandra. Thank you.
Yeah,
that is
thank
like
you.
such a different world, a completely different world. And so I appreciate it. It's almost like you're coming from a foreign country. So thank you for sharing all that, all that information.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it. Okay, so we have two more. We will turn it over for our final two speakers. We will go to Amy Lamberti, my neighbor, who is a lawyer who works at the Met, and we have many people on the screen who love their art history classes. And there's, some great art history professors at Fordham, and Emily was an art history major. But a lot of students at Fordham are interested in like historical preservation, stuff that you have interested in. And of course, the Met is super cool too. So thanks, Amy. So take it away.
I'm actually much more nervous now than I was at 6:45 because I don't have slides and I don't have concrete advice. I was just going to come on and tell you, like, don't necessarily follow my career path, but don't give up hope, because it took me 20 years from graduating college to getting a job at the Met, but I'm there and I'm still learning every day, and I'm still trying to figure out what the right place for me is. So I would just share that I had an internship at the San Diego Museum of Art my senior year in college. And at that point, I really wanted to work in art history. And I didn't get a lot of support from my college. I was graduating from college in 1993, and that was a recession, which I'm pretty sure I didn't know about until there weren't that many jobs. I was obliviously studying art history and history. I had all these friends that were going to Wall Street or going into teaching, and I knew that neither of those were a good fit for me, and I wanted to try to build on my liberal arts education. So I applied, I found the program in historic preservation at Columbia University, and I applied, and I got in, but I still wasn't sure. I thought, like, maybe I can get a job in New York. And I literally walked the streets of Manhattan with a resume. I did a typing test at Condé Nast. I went to a temp agency. I went to galleries dropping off Arcis Rare Books on Madison Avenue. And the guy was like, "Sweetie, there are no jobs right now." So pretty soon I was like, okay, I guess I'll go to grad school. I will focus on my historic preservation program. And that was a really wonderful experience for me. It was 2 years. It was kind of doubling down on liberal arts for me in a way, because I have a lot of friends from the program. It was a very small program, but friends who are now technical conservators of buildings. And I'm, you know, I see what they're doing. They're like repainting, you know, Grand Central, or they're doing these incredible technical things. And that was never my expertise. I was like reading, writing, art history. That's what I do. So I became a history focus of the historic preservation program. And again, in 95, not that many job opportunities. So I was lucky that one of my professors offered me a position in her, a temporary position at the AIA, American Institute of Architects New York chapter. Oh shoot, I forgot to start my timer. Okay, it's 7:41. We're only in 95. And I worked there for 2 years. And through that, I got to know people in architecture firms. And from my background in historic preservation, I knew I didn't just want, I love the old buildings. I loved all the buildings except the Trump buildings. And I was really focused on architectural history. And I thought, I'll go work as a marketing manager, which is a job I didn't know existed, at an architecture firm. And I wrote the proposals. I researched the potential projects and wrote the proposals with the architects about like trying to get new work. And it was really fun, but there were a lot of personal and family and economic reasons why it wasn't a career path for me. And I had to sort of think about, you know, offline, happy to answer that, but not on a recorded call. So I sort of, at the same time, we were pursuing projects at law schools, and I went from thinking in 1993, when I was graduating from college, that like going to law school was like the most unimaginative thing you could do, to thinking that lawyers do all these incredible things and maybe I should go to law school. And there were also sort of hero role models of mine in New York who were lawyers that are now leaders of cultural institutions at the Natural History Museum, Hunter College, Landmarks Commission. So I decided to apply to law school. And my thinking was, I'll go to law school and I'll become like one of these people who helps the buildings get built. And long story short, I sort of didn't think about what could get me a job at a museum. I didn't realize that real estate lawyer was like as far apart from me, my personality, as there was. And I became a litigator. And I worked for 8 years at a law firm downtown. And I was so far from the 1995 Amy that I couldn't believe I was where I was. But when it came time for me to really think about a new job, and P.S. she mentioned, I went to Fordham. I loved it. Go Fordham Law School. I started talking to people. And whenever I spoke to people about being a lawyer, I said, you know, I've always wanted to work in a museum. And it happened that there aren't a lot of litigator positions at museums. I'm happy to talk offline with anybody who's interested in art law about what practice areas are probably much more practical in terms of pursuing this career. So again, like, don't follow my path, but don't lose hope is my, and it ended up that this position opened up. And I had, you know, I don't want to say connections, but my Fordham Law School legal writing professor had worked very closely with my current boss's husband. And so he found the job description for me and said, you know, if you apply, let me know. And I did, and it has worked out so far. I always say so far. So, you know, I think like in terms of planning for the future, I would say I never did. I always followed my gut. I went to places where I was interested in working and where I thought the people would be good people to help support me in growing in my career. And I think that's, for me personally, that was really how I ended up like being able to progress the way that I have. And, you know, but I also want to echo like the work hard. It was, you know, the references from my law firm that I think made my current boss comfortable hiring me. And so again, like there's so many factors that come into play, but I just look at all of you and I see such hope, and I love that you're liberal arts majors, and I just want you to know, like, don't give up. You're going to end up in fantastic places 20 years later or 5 years later. So happy to answer questions, and thank you for listening.
Yay, thank you so much, Amy. Super interesting thinking about that field of historic preservation and law, and that's really interesting. I can't wait for the Q&A. So we'll just keep moving along to our final speaker, Ellen Nguyen, who is an education policy consultant. And just looking at all these little squares, there's so many poli-sci majors, humanitarian studies, international political economy. majors. And, so much of the work at Fordham is about using our intellectual work in the service of the promotion of justice and equity. And I know that's important to your work too. So I know a lot of students are interested in just the kind of field, at least kind of the spirit of the field that you're in too, just looking at these faces on the screen. So I'll turn it over to Alan, who's a good friend of my best friend in grad school. Thanks, Alan, zooming in from Brooklyn.
Yeah, hey everybody. Can people hear me okay?
Yep.
All right, I'm going to start my timer. I tend to talk fast anyway, but I'm going to be quick because I feel like the questions are like where the great conversation happens. But I'm really excited to chat with everyone and kind of echo the like, this is a hard time for everyone. This is a really hard time to be in college and to be thinking about careers. So just know there's a lot of empathy coming from those of us who are already out there in the professional world. So I'm an education consultant. I feel like people are like, what does that mean? Right now it means that I do projects for education nonprofits and for foundations, often helping them do a big piece of writing, like a proposal for funding or maybe a strategic plan, something along those lines. I'm doing this in a part-time capacity because I have 3 tiny children, 4 and under at the moment. But for 20 years before then, sort of I had full-time regular jobs in the education policy world, which if you'd asked me at 18, I'd be like, what's that? No, I don't want to do that. So again, like, you don't have to know, like, there's such a world out there. Like, you don't have to know. I really love what I do. I feel like I do something I care about a huge amount. I mostly work on equity in education, so making sure all kids, regardless of all their background characteristics, have access to a great public education, K-12, something I care a gigantic amount about. I work with really smart people who also care about what I care about. The work is challenging, it's varied. I tend to get bored really fast. It's just like a lesson I've learned. I don't get bored on what I do. I work with people who I think are smart and who care about what I care about as well. The wage has definitely been livable. I mean, I didn't make a ton in the beginning, but was able to work up to a wage where I've been able to live in New York City, which is obviously not a cheap place to live. So all that, like, major plug for like working for something you care about. It doesn't have to be a kind of a, you put a lot of other things on hold because you care about your career. I think you can do both of those things. I'm a proud liberal arts grad. I went to Haverford, which is a tiny little college outside Philadelphia. I went to a college smaller than my high school. Not too many people can say that. I was an urban studies major, and I concentrated, I think they used to say, in feminist and gender studies. It so doesn't matter what you major in. I mean, honestly, my mom was a Russian history major. She's had a massive career as a public health professional. She worked for Aetna for a million years. So it's just like, it doesn't matter. I feel like as a liberal arts undergrad, you learn to think, you learn to write, you learn to be curious, you learn that things are complicated and don't take it at its first pass. You learn to be a good researcher. You learn to work with people from different backgrounds. That's probably mostly out of class, right? Or maybe doing group projects, or maybe just living in a dorm or whatever. Like, you learn not to be a jerk. That stuff is really, really, really important. So just, a massive, massive plug for sort of a liberal arts background and what it gave me. I feel like I wouldn't have traded any of that, for anything. I'm just looking quickly at my notes. I think the thing about writing, like being a good writer, has been a massive help to me in my career. Being able to write succinctly, clearly, sort of got the grammar stuff down, can do it pretty quickly. Like, that has served me so well. Like, a million of those papers that you're sweating now, like, it does come back in a good way in your career. So talk a little bit about my path. Again, I graduate with this degree, no idea what I'm going to do. I was lucky that there was this, it's actually how I know the friend who Brenna and I know in common, a healthcare research and kind of consulting company, for profit actually, that recruited on campus. And I was like, okay, that seems good. That was my only for-profit job I've ever had since then, but it was a great start. I counted up that I've had 9 jobs. The first 2 jobs I got from applying in a very standard way. Well, the next 7 I got through somebody I knew. So I will just like to give some concrete data, right? It is about who you know, and it is about making strong connections, and it is about like all that sort of networking stuff, which seems so nebulous. It is still how people get jobs, right? People refer people who they know, who they've had a face-to-face connection with. They can say like, oh yeah, Ellen worked for me. Oh, she was, she did really excellent work, right? Like, that stuff matters. I hire lots of people now in various jobs. Like, that's the kind of thing that I'm looking for someone to say to me. So I would just put that out there. I would also say I used to talk about my career in this way that was like, I was in the right place at the right time and I met somebody at a party who got me a job, and all those things are true. But this friend of mine who happens to be a woman of color checked me on it, and she said, you know, like maybe those things are true, but you're also white and you have a great education and your parents had good educations and they were professional. So I just want to like put that out there, that the whole privilege and access thing, like that is real. And I think a lot of times we don't acknowledge that opens a bunch of doors or makes somebody feel more comfortable knocking on a door you might not normally want to knock on. So I just put that out there to share something that I've kind of learned in my career and how I talk about my own path. So I put that out there. Oh, that's my timer. Okay, I'm going to skip ahead. I have a couple of key pieces of advice. Hopefully they're helpful. Some are kind of cliches, some aren't. I will say the best way to get a job is to be great at your current job. Like just be awesome at your job. Like work really hard, exceed expectations, right? You don't have to be ridiculous, but like do a really good job. Be the person who your boss says like, oh yeah, they're like, I asked them to do X, like they do X plus Y, right? Like be really good at your job. Stay there long enough to have a track record. You don't have to stay for years. You can see I've had 9 jobs. I'm not that old. But stay long enough to have a track record so you can talk about your resume like, oh, I was at this place. I did this thing, right? Like I think that's very important, certainly as you kind of proceed in your career. My other pieces of advice are back to the whole, like, don't be afraid to ask. Don't be afraid to ask somebody to have coffee and have a virtual, you know, informational interview, whatever. That helped me get a bunch of jobs. I was often scared. I'll be the first to put that out there. Like, oh, that person's so senior to me. Like they have no interest in talking to me. And every time I asked, they said yes. I will talk to anybody. Any of you should contact me afterwards. I literally will not say no if somebody asks me to have like an informal job chat, because I feel like it's good karma. It like comes back around. So I would just like kind of white knuckle it a little bit and ask, right? And like, if anything, I know we're in COVID, so do Zoom, but face-to-face, like it makes all the difference in the world. And be prepared for those interviews, like know who you're talking to, know their background a little bit, know what they do, so you're not just asking dumb questions, honestly, and go in with one smart question, like something that you've thought about, not something that's very straightforward, like how do you get a job, but something about their industry, something you're curious about. So have in your pocket a question and write a thank you email. It's my really concrete advice. It does not need to be formal. It can be 2 sentences. Thanks for taking the busy time out of your day. I enjoyed blah, blah, blah about our conversation. Like, best your name. Literally, it takes 5 minutes, but send it. I remember the people who take the time to thank me, and you don't have to overthink it. It doesn't have to be more complicated than that. And that's all I got.
Yay! Thank you, everybody. Let's all unmute and do a round of applause for our speakers. Thank you so much, Ellen, and to all of our speakers. And I'm so glad we have 20 minutes left. But Ellen, that was really interesting. And especially what I am loving is just the range. You know, I love that people put like numbers of what they make on the table. I mean, I think I have one student on the screen, and I won't name names, but we were talking like numbers of student loan debt numbers. And so like salary is really important to a lot of students who are graduating with debt, but also students talking about or the speakers talking about following weird passions, whether that's like weird historic buildings, or Ellen, your issues of equity. And I'm just like, I can see students, I just can like match different, I know different people interested in so many of the things that you guys have shared. So thank you. That was really nice of you all to take time out of your evening to talk to this group of students. So with our remaining 20 minutes, I was trying to figure out how to do this, but why don't you guys take a second and write in the chat questions, and they can be like questions to the group or questions to someone in particular, and I'll call on people, and then I'll ask you to, I'll call on whoever wrote the question, and then that way you can unmute and say hi. So I'm like, to be honest, I don't even know how to do the blue hands, and I'm too scared to do that. I don't know how to do this. So what do you think? Should we just do that? Okay, let's do that. So open your chat, and it might take a minute. Okay, yeah, Sage, you can unmute and say bye. You said thanks for everybody. Some people had to leave. Yes. Okay, thanks, Sage. Good night. So we'll just give it a minute. And if,
Can I just share like a, you know, while people are typing, I was
Yeah.
reminded as everybody was talking about my father's career path, and he went to MIT, so not quite liberal arts, but he very quickly decided he didn't want to be a mechanical engineer and became a religion major at MIT.
oh,
And
wow,
he
I
went
didn't know
on
that,
to
Amy.
be, he's a pediatric heart surgeon. So it's like, that was, you know, in the 60s. So it is sort of
Wow.
like, you know, I mean, I think we have a lot of, especially like when I was graduating and I felt like I didn't know what the heck I was going to do. It was like, you know, I have to sort of cast back to that thing and realize that we're going to find our place, even if it takes a while.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, these are longer journeys. That's right. Thanks, Amy. Thanks, Amy. Sophie, thanks for your question for Jennifer. Sophie, do you mind unmuting and saying hi?
Hi.
So Sophie's an awesome junior in my Religion in the Modern World class, and she's asking Jennifer, what specific metrics did you look at to make sure your business would be successful? So Jennifer, you can unmute, right?
I'm unmuted, yes. Thank you. It's a complicated question actually, but in the beginning when I started, wow. Let me think about how to answer. I'm trying to give a short answer to this. I should have this short answer ready to hand. So how to determine whether it's successful or not, whether I was making money?
Yeah, or just like, did you like project out your expenses to see like whether or not you'd be able to quit or like?
Yeah. Yes, I did. I wrote a business plan, which my sister actually helped me with, my sister who owns the restaurant in Burlington, but it was very rough. The numbers were rough. But what I did do is I started with, so I'll tell you this, my goal is to be a $3 million company in 3 more years. I wanted to be a $3 million company in 5 years by the time things got going. COVID slows things down a little bit, but I'm actually doing really well. So I started with, I said I was going to invest up to about $150,000 of my own money if I had to. I decided to do my own money that I had saved up. A lot of you don't have that. You could get that from an investor, okay? That's not a large amount of money in terms of someone investing in a business. When we look at Shark Tank, it's huge. So I said I wanted to do that because what I did is I assessed what it would cost to buy the capital equipment and get everything started up. And then I wanted to see how long it would take me to get a return on that investment. I wanted to get a return of the 150 within 2 years. So I did get that return in 2 years while I kept my other job. The way that so now I'm just projecting profit. Like I've put in all the startup money and now I'm just projecting profit. What I did do is I figured out what a bag of coffee should cost and how much profit I should make from each bag of coffee if I wanted to be able to make roughly $75,000 a year for 2 years consecutively so that I could get that 150 back in theory, right? So I set a price and I did some market analysis on my own. And the market analysis I did was just, I knew I wanted to be here in Vermont where I am now for a number of reasons. I went everywhere. I drank the coffee. I saw what people drank. I went to every store. And I know a lot about the coffee industry now, but like what was happening here? So I set a price point and I set my profit margin and I got that money back. And now I'm oversimplifying a bit, but now it's profit. Now it's just profit coming in. So metrics, I could sit down and formalize a lot of it and I have it in Excel sheets, but the funny thing is, I think if you have I need to fill in the details of it, but if you have it, like I have my tax returns, right? So I've got it all laid out, but to go further to the next stage, one of the things I want us to do now is sit down and actually map out exactly how I'm getting to that $3 million in sales in 3 more years. So that's a really bad answer, actually. This is great. So it's too much detail, right? But
No, I think that, you know, Sophie's a math major, so she can handle all the detail. She
you
likes
can
the
handle
detail.
no, you can handle
Yeah.
the detail, but I didn't have a short, succinct math. So
Yeah.
in other words, I didn't have my math was just really back of the napkin calculations, right? But it was safe, and I was really confident in the product and what I was doing. And I do remember I had that, like, when am I going to be making back the money I invested? How long will it take to do that? And how many bags of coffee do I need to making this much money per bag in order to, and can I do it? And so I didn't have, the whole thing spread out and logged out an accountant, but I do need that, actually. And I actually just hired someone to help me with the accounting, to get everything sort of to formalize it all and put it into a spreadsheet and a plan and so on.
Oh, that's good. That's helpful. Thank you, Jennifer. Let me just get to, there's a couple other questions. Okay, one, Scott Phillips has asked if any of the speakers have an example when their liberal arts degree provided insights beyond other people in the room who had, maybe different degrees. Like, can you think of any example, any of you, where your liberal arts degree kind of, came to help solve a problem or offered an insight in a situation? And
I promise I'll be short, but it's like, and then I was surprised at how qualified I was to start a business, generally speaking. I really was. Precisely, my long-winded explanation, a lot of thinking went into it that I couldn't formally map out, but I knew how to do it, right? And I knew what I needed to know, and I know what I need now. I knew how to communicate. I knew how to problem solve primarily. And so I knew how to talk to people. I knew how to present myself. It mattered a lot. And I thought I had no marketable skills when I left my profession. So I did, I found out.
Thank you. What about Ellen or Emmy? Anything you're thinking? I'm just looking at you guys right next to Jennifer up there.
Yeah, I'm happy to chime in. I will say I feel like I work with a lot of people who also have liberal arts backgrounds. I do not feel like I'm sort of unique in my industry at all. I will say that so before I was consulting, I built and led a professional development program. I worked for Teach for America for their alumni who wanted to be school systems leaders. So not necessarily like the superintendent, but probably like one rung below the superintendent for big public school systems. I worked for a long time for the New York City Department of Ed. And they hired me and they were like, here's some research that somebody did for us, like, go do it, right? And I really, like, obviously I hadn't done this before, and just the ability to be like, okay, it's just like Jennifer was saying, like, problem solve. Like, okay, if we want to be at ACT, if we want to start this program next fall, like, what do we have to do? Just like step by step by step, and not getting, I feel like oftentimes people get too in the weeds, but I'm just like up there, like, how do we get some people? How do we get some systems for them to go work in, right? Like, just really big picture and being able to work backwards, but also being able to sort of keep those goals in mind. I feel like are things, again, like I learned in my 4 years in college, regardless of the topic that I was working on.
Thanks, Ellen. Emmy or Amy or Alexander, anybody else? I'll just quick say, Ellen, I mean, I think that's interesting. A lot of the students on the Zoom are going to do senior theses. And it is nice to think about, like, just that research a problem, like almost thinking of, rather than thinking about the topic that you study in school, like you're researching, like Emily did. I remember, Emmy, when you were an undergrad doing like really radical feminist, crazy performance art. And it's not so much like that topic becomes your career, but just that method. You have a question and you just go after that, and you go after it and research. And that would be, it seems like, the thing that you end up doing, kind of the practice of research and problem solving would be the transferable thing. Anybody else? There's some other questions on the table. We've got 10 minutes. Should I keep going? Yeah. Okay. Let's say I see Amelia. How do you go about curating your resume? I'll have two on the table. You guys can all see Amelia's about curating resume, and then Nick, you know, what happened, you're still unsatisfied, but what happens when you're passionate about something and it sours or just isn't paying the bill? How do you know about going next? What advice do you
Oh, I
have
can
someone
take
who
that one.
doesn't know what they want to do? So you see these 3 questions, let's just like chime in. Amy, go ahead. Yeah.
I feel like I skipped over something, and if I'm repeating myself, I'm sorry. I'm like trying to be concise, but I didn't turn on my timer like Ellen and Jennifer did. So when I was at the architecture firm, and I told the man whose name was on the door that I wanted to get a PhD in architectural history, and a PS, I had already applied to Columbia where I'd gotten my master's, and they'd rejected me. And he said, "You want to get your PhD in architectural history? Like, you're way too social to be a PhD student. Like, you can't go research." Like, he's like, no, you got to do something else. And that was a real, like, he said it kind of as a joke, but it was not a joke to me. It was sort of like, oh, this is what I thought I was going to do, and now I'm not able to do it. And so that's when I sort of recalibrated and was like, well, I feel like I want to go back to school. I think I need to do something to get out of the route that I'm on. And I think that's school. And that's when law school really opened up to me. When I went to law school, I really wanted to do something for the good of the world. And then I got married and realized that I had all this student debt, and I should probably try to get a job that paid better than, you know, my jobs before I went to law school, which was like $55,000 in 2001. So I went to a firm, and when I went to sit for my character interview in the New York City Bar Association, this very elegant, you know, established woman lawyer said, "Oh, I see you have a master's in historic preservation and now you're practicing law. Are you able to bring those two together?" And I was like, "No." I said, "No, I'm just really reviewing documents at a firm." Which, by the way, art history really teaches you how to review documents well. And she said, "Well, that's okay. Someday those two will come together." And lo and behold, now I'm getting to do more of that. So it's about like not giving up, and just keeping looking and making those connections and trying to keep going forward. And I guess the thing I would say is, like, again, I had no idea what marketing for an architecture firm meant, and I did it for 4 years, and it was really fulfilling until I realized I should probably try to do something else. So anyways, I hope that's not too rambling.
No, that's great. Thank you, Amy. That's super helpful. So you guys can all see the questions. Anyone else on our
Yeah.
panel want to chime in on any of the other questions?
I can
Emily?
chime in on the curating
Yeah.
your resume one.
Yeah.
My advice with that would just be to start with, just write your resume, like just your basic one. First of all, like just kind of nail that. And then maybe, so don't get overwhelmed by, just get something solid down, get the information down, and, maybe get someone to help you who's been there to give you a second pair of eyes for that. And then what I would say, once you have that good baseline, you can then tailor it, and hopefully it's not too much work. It's just really a matter of like making a copy and sort of like, looking at that job description and not lying about your background, or not, being untrue, dishonest about anything you've done, but like, highlighting different things that you've done in different ways, putting those bullet points higher up, maybe describing your work in different ways that is tailored to that job. So I think just always having that really solid foundation that you can just kind of copy and paste and chop things around. And then the second one I feel like I can answer is about when you're something you're passionate about unexpectedly sours, that Nick was talking about. And that's basically exactly what happened to me in the art world. I was working at a museum, and kind of like Amy, I won't get too much into the details of what happened, but I just suddenly felt like I was making no money, and I wasn't feeling very appreciated in my job. And I basically took a week off and just attacked the job hunt, and just really, went for it, and just applied for everything, called all my contacts, called in all the favors, told everyone I was looking, thought about all the different types of jobs I would do. I would be an executive assistant. I wanted to work in a creative field. I mean, luckily it kind of led to my job at IDEO, where it kind of led to me to where I am now. but I was very sour on my job and just basically threw myself into applying, connecting, and just being determined, and just kind of blanketing the world with connections, emails, of applications. So that was kind of my tactic for that one.
Thank you. What about this question, Austin's question? And I know that there's a lot of students who just really don't know yet, but it sounds like all of you had a journey that was a long, kind of a long journey that you didn't know so early on exactly. Any just little nuggets of wisdom for someone who doesn't know what they want to do? Alexandra, I guess you really did, but you had to figure out in college, but you must have had your undeclared moment.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think I'm going to let someone else take this because I feel like I've been pretty steadfast on my path. So I haven't really taken much time off ever. Yeah. But I will say for the resume question, one tip that I have really quickly that I got when I just graduated, I graduated in my resume without having had a job at that point, really. It was 2 pages long. And my director took one look at it and he was like, okay, you don't need a 2-page resume. You haven't done anything really. So keeping it to 1 page or less was advice that I got. And I shortened it and just made everything really concise. If it would be helpful, I'd be happy to send everyone my current resume too, so you can take a look at kind of the structure that I have.
Sure, thank you.
I had something for the last person and also for the passion, but I'm not sure what take time off means.
Like before you go to decide on grad school, you're just gonna.
Well, take time off, I mean, if it means financially, like, because someone's got to pay the bills, right? Or if it means not enter a career path or something like that. So
well, Austin, you unmute and say, you can have the last word. We got 2 minutes. So you quick say a little bit more about what you mean and then we'll.
Yeah.
And then...
All right. Yeah. My question was, okay. So I'm like a music major and I have no idea what I'm going to do because, what are you going to do with a music major? But like my mom is kind of pressuring me into law school. Not too much, but I definitely feel some pressure that I need to do something with my degree or I need to go to grad school like immediately. And I don't know what to do, especially as a music major. It's not really clear what I'm going to do with that. So I'm planning on taking a year off if like my parents were okay with that. And I don't know how I would spend that year, how to figure out like, all right, how to spend that year. What am I going to do?
Thanks, Austin. Yeah, we have 1 minute. Anyone have a quick little, couple sentences, of someone, about to graduate and you have a year where you're just not sure.
If you want to use your music degree for something, start looking around, finding out where you can do anything with it. If you want a year off from the music stuff, the music part of it, then go out into the world and do something you have never even thought about doing before. Work construction. There are a lot of construction jobs, right? If you have a little money saved up, well, you can't travel now. That doesn't work. But there's a lot of construction happening. There's a lot of people in the schools who need a lot of help with all kinds of different sorts of education and tutoring and private tutoring, especially with music degrees. My daughter did a lot of music. I'm not musical at all. You can read music. You can think in ways a lot of people can't. And I don't think you probably realize what a valuable skill it is. So you've got an analytical mind and you have a feeling mind too. Like there's got to just talk to people, ask them, volunteer somewhere, and don't be afraid to change your mind 1,000,000 times if you need to. I know that sounds silly, but it's not. Like just go out. And when I got out of school, when I was finished, when I didn't know I picked up the phone book and I actually randomly called places I thought I was interested and asked if I could have some more information on their job opening. And I made that up. I'm not, and I actually got a job out of it after calling about 20 or 30 different places, something that was interesting and low, but with the internet, you can do that much more easily. So
Well, I see it's 8:16, so I want to be respectful of people's time. Let me say one couple, 2 sentences. That I just am so grateful for all of you to zooming in, our guest speakers. I am so grateful for you taking time out of your evening. And I think that so much of life is responding to things that come before you, random things, and so I just think more concrete, different kinds of people with different kinds of paths that come before our students helps them do the important work of kind of imagining their futures in all different sorts of ways. And we had such a wide variety here, and it's just really awesome to see 5 women doing completely different sorts of work who all, did sort of a liberal arts major and did an undergraduate major and are doing really interesting, meaningful, creative work. Work for justice, work in medicine and COVID research, law, historic preservation, your own business, living in Vermont. So thank you so much. This was quite a range of experiences, and thank you so much students for the great questions and for showing up. And also in the chat, you guys are really, still giving advice in the chat. So this is really helpful. Thank you, everybody. I will stay here till everybody's signed off, but have a wonderful evening, and I look forward to following up. I'll probably see many of you later